Less than a century ago, European explorers, in their quest for the source of the Nile, first penetrated into East Africa. Until then, the world outside had heard only scattered tales of Africa's scenic wonders, its fearsome wildlife, and its bizarre peoples. In the wake of the early explorers, a great wave of European missionaries and colonizers who brought the outside world to East Africa began to report in detail on the Dark Continent. An image of Africa resulted, an image that since has been nourished by overly romantic reports, adventure films, and sensational novels. Africa, an untamed continent peopled by primitive savages. The childlike pygmies epitomize this image. Dressed in scanty loincloths fashioned from the bark of trees, employing poisoned arrows in their search for food, they seem jealously to guard their primitive ways. Wild, unrestrained dancing is the kind of African reality best known. So the world came to think of Africans as living in some remote, almost prehistoric era. Events of this decade have forced a reappraisal of this image. Africans are no longer thought of merely as anachronistic vestiges from some remote age. Their demands for political self-determination ring out from all parts of Africa. Here in Mbarara, a small town in the Nkore district of Uganda, one can, almost any day, come upon a political rally where literate, nationalistic Africans insist on progress as they define it. Where did these politically conscious, progress-oriented people of the 20th century come from? What does it take to enable these people to behave in ways so remote from the traditions of preceding generations? The men of the Banyankole tribe live in a rapidly changing world. What is their world like? What are its demands, and how are they met? A few miles outside Mbarara, one can find the people of Nkore living much the way they have always lived. Numbering 450,000 persons, 5% are cattle keepers. They are the descendants of the nomadic Hema who found the grassy plains of Uganda well suited to their cows. These Nkore longhorns are milked for sustenance, hoarded as wealth, and loved as pets. Most Bahimas still live with their cows in temporary enclosures called kraals. While the men are out tending the cattle, the women and children do the few required tasks about the kraal, like churning butter. Women also fashion woven tops for wooden milk pots. Their techniques are ancient, although a woman might today use a razor blade to facilitate her task. A skilled, attractive woman can bring her family several cows in bride wealth, and a prosperous cattleman might afford several wives. A shred of evidence of contact with outside cultures may be seen in a kraal, such as that razor blade. But one seeking traditional Hema life will find it here among these herdsmen of Nkore. In the shade of the plantain groves above the Hema's grazing lands live the agricultural people of Nkore, called Bairu. At one time, a single clan would live in a cluster of houses. This is seldom true today, as individual householders tend to build their mud and wattle homes near the dirt roads which now traverse the district. Women do the bulk of the household tasks, including cooking and cultivating. These traditionally subsistence agriculturalists live primarily on the plantain diet so widespread in this part of Africa. For most Bairu families, the daily meal consists of matoki, a yellow mashed potato-like dish made from the fruit of the plantain, a fruit resembling the banana. Other plants, like coffee, introduced by the protectorate government as a cash crop, are grown alongside the traditional staples. A male-dominated activity is the making of plantain beer. Many hours of labor are needed to produce a sufficient quantity of the fruit juice. The liquid is filtered many times through heaps of grass, piled high in a pit lined with the bark of plantain trees. The juice is then refiltered into hollowed-out gourds. Finally, it is poured into a canoe-like storage place where it will remain for days. Sorghum, a grain grown by the Nkore, is added. Fermentation begins, and in a few days, the family will have beer enough to sell some to their neighbors. This old spearmaker enjoys his beer break. The beer is preferred over European-style beer, even by those Nkore who have tasted both. For older Nkore, not likely to have tasted European beer, the pleasures of the local brew go unchallenged. Both groups of Nkore, the Bahima herdsmen and Bairu farmers, meet in the marketplace. An Iru-made spear is sold to a Hima herdsman, who will use it to defend his cattle and possibly himself from marauding lions. The marketplace is also the scene of an even more significant coming together, that of Africa and the world outside. While local-made goods, both functional and decorative, dominate this marketplace, the market offers products manufactured outside of Africa. Native jewelry attracts some, but imported textiles are also much in evidence. Thus, the market epitomizes the most significant aspect of life in Africa today, the contact between cultures. Culture contact and the diverse effects this has on the people involved in part accounts for the prevalence of so many different patterns of behavior in Nkore. The ways in which elements of Western culture affect the behavior of the Nkore are many and subtle, and few Nkore escape unaffected. Daily bus service is available throughout the Nkore district. From Hima kraals and Bairu huts, the Nkore tribesmen come to town. They come on bicycles, by bus, on foot, even by car. Near the traditional site of the palace of the King of Nkore, Umbarara is now a thriving little urban center. Umbarara, where European government employees, African workers, and Indian merchants daily interact. Umbarara's main street, lined with Indian-owned dukas, shops in which goods from Asia, Europe, and America can be found. For most African shoppers, the simple things of life, such as canned foodstuffs, cooking utensils, fuel for stoves and lamps, have become necessities. That such purchases have become routine would seem strange to a traditional Munyankole. It is certainly hard for some to understand that a clerk employed in Umbarara might even have to buy his matoke rather than grow his own. Business, even small-scale industry, such as bicycle repair, is beginning to attract some of the younger people. Some might barter their labor for chickens, but most have adopted a cash economy. Much like the old frontier towns of America, Umbarara presents to the Banyankole the many material delights of the outside world. The greengrocer is a successful African businessman whose son is a regular customer of the Uganda bookshop. He is very much aware of contemporary events throughout the world, thanks to the newspapers and periodicals available inside. He can read the books the Europeans buy and knows the literature of the Western world at least as well as he knows the Banyankole folk tales told by his grandfather. For many Banyankole, Umbarara is primarily thought of as the seat of government. Today, a trip to Umbarara to pay taxes means much the same as the ancient tradition of paying homage to the sacred drums of Nkore. In former days, the drums, resembling two great staring eyes, symbolize the absolute power of the king. Though stripped of much of his former power, the king today lives in a palace near the sacred drums. Above the palace flies the flag of Nkore. On it, the sacred drums still stare. But all Banyankole know that whatever power their king retains has been determined by some higher power. Nkore has been part of Uganda, a British protectorate, throughout the lifetimes of most Banyankole. Annually, on Commonwealth Day, the people of Nkore gather on the green near the district commissioner's office to view the ceremonies honoring the monarch of Britain. A royal message conveyed by the district commissioner elevates a Munyankole Boy Scout to Queen Scout status. As the Queen's words are translated into Nkole's native dialect, the Africans, Asians, and Europeans alike share the honor bestowed on one of Nkole's young men. The high point of the festivities is the parade of Nkole school children. The parade is viewed with great pride by their elders, for the children will bring more of civilization's benefits to Nkole. But many parents have mixed feelings, for as their children assimilate European ways, some of the cherished Nkole traditions will be lost. In 1960, 40,000 children were enrolled in primary school. 400 children, mostly boys, are in junior secondary school, 115 young Nkole in senior secondary school. These figures are sure to grow as the resistance to educating girls further breaks down. In the schools, particularly the secondary schools, the future elite of Nkole are trained in much the same way as their peers in the classrooms of England. Many of these children will go on to university, either in East Africa or abroad. What role will education play in shaping the personalities of these young people? Will it, as many Europeans suggest, merely provide a veneer of civilization, beneath which will live an African still dominated by primitive motives and perceptions of a world full of forces he cannot understand? Questions like these have long intrigued social scientists interested in the interrelationships of culture and personality. Hopefully, continuing research will provide answers to such questions. A visit to the Mbarara Hospital would point up how subtle are the behavioral changes that culture contact produces. There we would find evidence that for people like the Nkole, new institutions, ideas, values, and concepts do not displace all the old ones. Rather, that new behavioral patterns are somehow integrated with the old. Modern medical practices are warmly accepted by the Nkole. Waiting rooms and outpatient clinics are always crowded. Patients come to the hospital from miles around, even if their ailment requires nothing more than an aspirin. Their relatives often make lengthy trips to visit them, staying for several days at a nearby hostel. It is significant that Nkole who come to visit their hospitalized relatives seldom fail to bring with them medicinal herbs and other native remedies. Of all the areas of traditional Nkole life, perhaps the least resistant to change has been religion. While vestiges of traditional religious practices may be found, the impact of Christianity has been great. Sundays, the church at Mbarara is crowded, as Nkole from all over the district converge by all available transport. Some studies of behavioral change would suggest that a man's religious convictions die hard compared to his habits of dress or other seemingly more superficial habits. But here that seems not to be so. The explanation of the widespread acceptance of Christianity may lie in the history of Nkole's contact with the outside world. For much that is of non-African origin was introduced by the churches. Thus, in many respects, to be civilized or modern means to many Africans to be Christian. The schools and hospitals, which are now government-supported, were, until recently, the sole responsibility of the churches. But even if we understand the factors contributing to the general acceptance of Christianity and other non-African concepts, the problem remains of explaining the different degrees of acceptance characteristic of different individuals. What kinds of personality traits, what kinds of individual experiences contribute to the process whereby one person does or does not adopt a new behavior pattern? This is the kind of question current psychological research in rapidly changing societies attempts to answer. This church retains some Nkore drums, which are used to call the faithful to Sunday service. To what extent does the Christianized African retain traditional pre-Christian beliefs? Weddings in Nkore reveal in a striking way the interaction of African with European traditions. A wedding party like this one, taking place at the couple's new home, may have some features familiar to Western peoples. The principals prepare for a formal portrait, while the guests await a feast. But many vestiges of traditional patterns remain, the most notable being the solemn mood of the participants. Today, most weddings are performed in church. Of the several which might occur on a single day, some retain more of the traditional customs than do others. Formerly, a young man would negotiate with the family of his chosen bride, transmitting to them some bride wealth, cattle if he were a Muhima, a goat or some beer if he were a Mwiru. Often the groom would have to engage in a half-serious battle with the young girl's friends, subduing them in order to take his bride away to her new home. These practices have not completely died out. Most couples married by the church retain the bride wealth custom, although some of the younger Banyankole seriously question the practice. Brides seldom smile. Marriage seems still to be, at least symbolically, a defeat. Typically, brides fast 1 or 2 days before the wedding. Emerging from the ceremony, they appear worn out, as if vanquished in battle. The more Europeanized the couple, the more European-like the wedding. Here the marriage of 2 school teachers, both of whom are highly Europeanized, incorporates many features of a European wedding. The white gown, the bridesmaids, the flower girls, transportation for the guests, and a decorated car rented for the occasion.
Venga, baila, cha, cha, cha. mama yo, leo nimepata msichana mama yo, nami nampenda we wangu mama yo, nami nampenda we wangu mama yo, naye anipenda we wangu mama yo, naye anipenda we wangu mama yo, tumekwisha agana kwa kuoa, tumekwisha agana kwa kuoa.
The party to celebrate this wedding is exceedingly Western-like. The several-tiered wedding cake, a battery-operated radio providing Swahili jazz, imported English china on which to serve the tea and cakes. The native musical group serenading the couple as they enter their new home is about all that remains from the traditional practices. At an increasing rate, new construction goes on in Mbarara. These buildings may house a motion picture theater, automobile showrooms, and radio supply stores with the latest records from abroad. The new shops will offer canned frankfurters from Denmark, aspirins, Coca-Cola, and the latest super-fast film. These days, the King of Nkore spends much of his time dedicating new facilities, such as this library at the senior high school, a library stocked with books purchased by an American foundation. Events like these are important occasions, but they are no longer rare. This aspect of the contact between cultures goes on at an ever-increasing intensity. Culture contact means many different things to the Nkore. Some of them will be molded into Europeans. Others will behave much as their ancestors. Who among the Nkore will be most Europeanized? What does becoming more Europeanized really mean for those caught up in the process? What are the limits of the process, if any? We know that some Nkore will talk, act, dress, even think like Europeans. Others will not. How much of the old will be retained? To what extent can a man's personality remain untouched by the changing world around him? It is clear that important behavioral changes are occurring, in some orderly fashion, although the order may not now be discernible. The critical aspect of culture change, for those experiencing it, is a slow process of learning, of acquiring new habits, perceptions, and concepts, and somehow integrating them into an existing behavioral pattern. To an outsider looking in on Africa, the winds of change appear to be of gale force. An impression of dramatic upheaval may be valid, but for the Nkore, like most people experiencing culture change, the dominant response has been, and very likely will continue to be, a gradual readjustment to the changing demands of an increasingly complex world.